Howdy gamers, in this video I'm going to be talking about why to run the runes that are good on Volibear. I do think that Volibear sucks as jungle, so sorry if you came for that. I think that he's really good in top lane, and then also he's okay as support as a counterpick to Yuumi, and he's also pretty good as a, what do you call it, like a farming bot laner with things like Fasting Senna. So if anything else would come into meta like Fasting Senna, Volibear might be an okay pick with it, as he's just generally a strong tank champion once he gets farm. So that's pretty much why he functions in the top and the bot lane as a carry. And then as support, he also has his utility where he still has engage and then a lot of damage, but mostly his immediate engage. So I'll start off with support as it's the easiest. Nothing's really changed since Season 9. It's still going to be Aftershock as his keystone, as you need a lot of tankiness for free, and that's what Aftershock gives you, whether you're engaging with the Q or your E, or even if you're peeling with the Q and the E. The defensive utility you get through Aftershock is going to help you stay on a target and then build up your W so that you can actually be damaging them without dying as support. And then since your support puts you in the resolve tree, Font of Life is going to be your best option, giving you healing on, or giving your allies healing whenever you CC a target. For the third rune, Bone Plating is going to be your best bet, as you just have more effective HP with it. Even if you're playing into ranged lanes as Volibear support, Second Wind just isn't as good because you don't have to be taking damage in those lanes. It's a lot of just waiting for the waves in the early levels like 1 to 5, and then you have threat against those ranged champions, so whenever you approach them, any damage they could turn against you would be blocked by Bone Plating, and then once you get on top of them, you have Aftershock, so any damage after that is going to be mitigated to a high degree as well. And then once you're on top of them, if they're really turning for damage, then they have to have pretty meaningful items for them to actually kill you as support. For the fourth rune, as support, I think Overgrowth is probably better than Revitalize. Even though Revitalize is okay, Revitalize was better last season because you could heal from Relic Shield, but you don't really do a lot of healing as support. And even though Volibear's passive does have like a lot of healing in it, you're going to get ignited as support almost every single time. So having more flat HP from Overgrowth is just going to be more useful. Having the free stats from Overgrowth is also more meaningful as support because you just have less items. With Overgrowth, you absorb life essence from monsters or enemy minions that die near you, permanently gaining 3 max health for every 8, and then whenever you've absorbed 120 monsters or enemy minions, you gain an additional 3.5% maximum health. That's like a ruby crystal for free. That's really big for support. For the secondary runes, Hextech Flash is your best, like the best secondary rune there is. Everything else from the other trees can just go like, they have to compete with Hextech Flash basically, because Hextech Flash is so much of your playmaking potential, because even when your flash is down, the enemy always has to respect the Hextech Flash distance from a bush, so that you basically always maintain pressure regardless of the situation if you have Hextech Flash versus not. So it's your best bet. Perfect Timing is really good, but Hextech Flash in solo queue is always going to beat it. Like, Perfect Timing is going to accelerate your build path into gargoyles and whatnot, but the pressure that you give up for Hextech Flash is just a lot higher. And then as support, you can choose Minion Dematerializer, Biscuit Delivery, or Cosmic Insight. All of these are good options. I think if you're playing against another melee support, Minion Dematerializer gives you a lot of value because you're always going to be dematerializing the cannon minion. And then if you do that, you're going to have lane control, but also you're going to have control around the times in the lane where it matters, where you're going to dematerialize the cannon minion. That's going to give you and your AD carry level 6. That's going to give you a better all-in at that time. It's going to help you push waves to get objective control, or, you know, quote-unquote river control, whatnot. So it gives you more opportunities to gain control over the enemy that you otherwise couldn't have if you don't have Minion Dematerializer. Biscuits are okay because they give you access to more mana. Volibear really doesn't use Biscuits that well because he doesn't spend a lot of mana in lane, but they're not bad on him, especially if you're not going to be building Righteous as your first item. Cosmic Insight is really good because you get 5% cooldown reduction on your abilities, items, and summoner spells, and Volibear uses, or can use, all of that. The 5% on your Q and E is okay because it lets you get 2 rotations off if you survive long enough in a fight, and then having 5% off your Ignite and Flash is obviously useful, and then having 5% off your Righteous Glory or Gargoyles is like, it's okay. It's not crazy useful. For the adaptive runes, for support, I think that like cooldown reduction is just kind of better used by other support champions. So I think Adaptive Force and then Armor is completely fine for Volibear. Since you have the AD support item now, I think that running the 1 Adaptive Force is pretty good because it gives you pretty significant damage in combination with the Steel Shoulder Guards. And then having double armor makes you just tankier in the lane. If you're playing into like almost any magic damage support, just run armor and magic resist, as having the double value becomes more meaningful as support. So that's my thoughts on Volibear support. I don't think there's really much to it. It's like you get the extra durability in Aftershock, Bone Plating, and Overgrowth. You get a little bit of damage through Adaptive Force, and then a lot of pressure in Hextech Flash, a little bit of utility with Cosmic Insight, and then mostly tankiness with Armor and Magic Resist, and then like this small amount of utility through Font of Life. And then it's really just about playing to only engage as Volibear support. For top lane, it's a completely different story. It's really about how you can dominate the laning phase, and then once the enemy is at a deficit, it's like you're playing Darius, where you always have this engage potential against them, and even when things are even, you have really, really good gank setup for your junglers. So in the top lane, it becomes a toss-up of like, what's the keystone that's good for him? Like press the attack, conquer, or grasp. And I think simply put, if you're against squishier champions, so any champion that isn't a bruiser or a tank, I think press the attack is really good against because it gives you more burst damage effectively. With press the attack, whenever you hit an enemy champion with 3 consecutive basic attacks, you deal bonus adaptive damage, and then you also expose them, increasing all damage they take for 6 seconds from all sources by 8 to 12%. So you're going to be increasing the damage that you're dealing with your W, which is so much of your damage in a solo lane, and then also just dealing more flat damage against them. Against squishier champions, this becomes really, really good because you're just adding to your burst damage against them. If you're against tanks or bruisers, I think that Conquer is going to be your best bet in most cases, because with Conquer, if you're playing into bruisers with Conquer, press the attack, you're not going to be bursting them. You have to just basically stay in a fight longer and hit them more to actually kill them. And Conquer is better in that case because of the damage that builds up and then also sustains you over time. With Conquer, your basic attacks and spells that deal damage to enemy champions grant you 2 stacks of Conquer, and then the Conquer is going to be giving you bonus Adaptive Force, which is going to be attack damage for Volibear, and then once it's fully stacked, you heal for 15% of the damage that you deal to champions. So with that, it's just more useful in the duration of a longer all-in, which in the top lane is going to be against most champions. Against like every bruiser and almost every single tank, you're going to have a really extended all-in because you're both running Conquer, and then if you don't have Conquer against them, it makes things really awkward. And if you're not bursting them in one rotation with press the attack, then they're winning because they have Conquer. With something like Grasp of the Undying, it becomes a lot less obvious for me because Volibear is not really a champion that is trading with Grasp like other tanks would. Tanks that would trade good with Grasp would be champions like Scion, where they can take these 1 auto trades in combination with trading a couple of their abilities, and then the damage sustained with Grasp becomes more meaningful. But Volibear just makes such good use out of the extra damage offered from either press the attack or Conquer that Grasp becomes just a weaker option in my eyes. And I suppose against tank champions, like the weaker tank champions, like I think champions like Maokai and whatnot do really well into Volibear. But against weaker tank champions, I don't even know, man. I suppose, because I think press the attack would be your better bet against those tank champions, because yes, Grasp would help you in a 1v1 situation, but with press the attack against a tank champion, you'd be setting your jungler up for more damage in that case. And then whenever team fight starts, you would still be flipping the front line into your team probably. And then with press the attack, you'd be exposing them, therefore increasing all the damage that they take. So I think press the attack into tanks, like turbo tanks like Maokai, Scion, and then against squishier champions is your best bet. But against bruisers and then weaker tanks, I think Conquer is your best bet. I just don't see a situation in which Grasp would be better, but maybe I'm missing something. I definitely am, but yeah. So with press the attack or Conquer, it's putting you in the precision tree. The other runes offered in the precision tree are pretty high value for Volibear. For the second rune here, Triumph is really your best bet. You don't need the extra mana offered from Presence of Mind, and Overheal's almost entirely useless for the top lane. With Triumph, takedowns restore 12% of your missing health and grant you additional 20 gold. So whenever you actually kill a champion, either in a 1v1 or in a 2v2, you have more health to play with, and that in combination with your passive is really, really hard for the enemy to deal with if you're actually surviving in fights. So it just adds to your survivability. Volibear's health is his main resource. The more that you have, the better you can play fights out, basically. And Triumph just gives you more health for getting a kill or assist, whether it be in a 1v1, a skirmish, or a team fight. For the third rune, you have good options in Alacrity or Tenacity. Again, if you're playing into tank matchups, I think it's a pretty obvious bet to take Tenacity. Champions like Maokai, Zac that are just always going to be CCing you. Legend Tenacity becomes just more useful against them. But against bruiser champions with really weak CC, champions like Irelia, Camille, etc., I think Alacrity is going to be your better bet because it's really about trading blow for blow with them. With Conquerors, since you're building up that AD, the attack speed is going to be more useful because you're just hitting harder, and then if you're hitting more often, you're just dealing more damage with it. So I think defaultly, attack speed should be your best bet, but you should pay attention to your matchup, and then if you're playing into any tanks with a lot of CC. Even if there's a lot of CC across the map, you can also consider that because let's say you're playing against like an Ornn where CC isn't going to be helping you a ton. If you're playing against like an Ornn with a Zac jungle and a Nautilus mid and a Thresh support, Tenacity is going to be way more meaningful in the mid game than attack speed would be. And then Legend Tenacity in combination with Merc Treads is just like the perfect build against those types of champions. So look to build it and run Legend Tenacity when you can. For the fourth rune, Last Stand's going to be your best bet. Even though Coup de Grace, if you're playing with Press the Attack though, into squishy champions, Coup de Grace is fine. My problem with Coup de Grace is that you're probably overkilling these squishy champions anyways. So in the cases that you want to be, Last Stand's going to be better. In the cases where you're losing, Last Stand's going to be better because it's going to help you like in lower percentage fights. But with Press the Attack against squishy champions where you have more burst, Coup de Grace is okay. With Coup de Grace, you deal 8% more damage to champions who have less than 40% health. So obviously better against squishier champions where you're flipping them, you're bursting them a lot, and then you're biting them and killing them probably with one more auto. So Coup de Grace is just going to be really amplifying the damage you deal with W and then maybe 2 or 3 autos afterwards. If you're playing against bruisers or tanks, Last Stand's always going to be your best bet. With Last Stand, you deal 5 to 11% increased damage to champions while you're below 60% health, and the max damage is gained at 30%. So really, like if you're just hitting blow for blow and then also just basically just hitting tanks, which is basically every matchup in the top lane, Last Stand is simply just giving you more damage. In team fighting situations, and especially since Volibear has a lot of AoE with his ult, you're just going to be dealing a lot more damage to every single target that you're hitting because of this. And since Volibear can survive with very low amounts of HP because of Triumph and because of his passive, you can really get a lot of value out of Last Stand, as most like of these bruiser tank champions can in the top lane. So it's a really efficient rune, and you just get a lot of value for the survivability that you have in Volibear's kit. For the secondary runes, I think your best bet is probably going to be Resolve, as Volibear just uses it really, really well. Second Wind and Bone Plating are really good on Volibear. If you're playing into only a few matchups, do I think that Volibear needs Bone Plating? Most melee champions really, really need Bone Plating, but because Volibear has his interrupt with his E and his Q, he has a lot of time to like either interrupt the enemy's initial engage, which is what Bone Plating helps against so much because it gives you more effective HP, but is on a higher cooldown. So it's better into melee champions that dive onto you like Camille and Irelia. But since Volibear has interrupts for those, I don't think it's as high value for him. I think something like Second Wind is just better because of the nature of how it functions. With Second Wind, after you take damage from an enemy champion, you heal for 4% of your missing health plus 6 over 10 seconds. Second Wind in combination with Triumph and Volibear's passive all work together to like just keep you alive at low amounts of HP because Second Wind's based on your missing health. If you're taking any poke damage in lane, even against not ranged champions in the top lane, if you're playing against short range melee champions like Rumble, Ornn, where they're melee, they're short range, but they still have these poke abilities, Second Wind in combination with Dorn Shield really helps offset the damage that they can build up against you. And against ranged champions, this is even higher value because they're basically always auto attacking you. But you have this trade off where you trade your health for your CS, and then eventually you have all in potential against them. So yeah, second wind just gives you so much effective HP regardless of the matchups that I think it's your best bet in almost every single case. And in Volibear's like hard losing matchups, champions like Garen, I think bone plating is completely fine because it's more important to offset that damage immediately than it would be sustain it. But in most matchups, second wind's the best bet for Volibear. For the other runes, you have good options in Demolish or Overgrowth. I think Overgrowth is more of a steady option. With Overgrowth, you absorb life essence from monsters or enemy minions that die near you. Again, permanently increasing your maximum health by 3 for every 8. Whenever you've absorbed 120 monsters or enemy minions, you gain an additional 3.5% maximum health. For support Volibear, that gives them like about a ruby crystal. For top lane Volibear, or even carry Volibear in the bot lane, it would give you about 280 to like 300 health once you have like 2 or 3 health items completed, so it becomes a bit higher value. For top lane Volibear in solo queue, though, Demolish is really, really good because you're able to actually get the Demolish proc off because of your Q. You can, even against melee champions, you can just stand in front of the turret once you have the wave pushed and then auto and Q it and run away without the enemy really being able to attack you, because you also have your E to interrupt them if they're trying to dash onto you. So you can get the Demolish proc off even in a neutral situation. If you've killed your lane opponent or forced them out of lane, then Demolish just gives you the ability to get turret plates faster, and then through that you can just snowball the game faster. And that's a lot of what Volibear top's looking to do, is kind of like Darius. You just kill the top laner, get the turret plates, get a lot of gold, win the game, etc. That's your ideal situation. But if you have a losing lane, or if you want to play things just more standard, or like not where you have to do that to win, then Overgrowth's probably your best bet. But in solo queue, Demolish is just probably the higher estimated value rune, but I do think Overgrowth's better. So that's my thoughts on that. With Revitalize, it's kind of like other champions use Revitalize better. The same thing as support, even though you do have healing in your kit with the passive, I don't think it's that useful, because you're better off if you have healing in like the instances of your abilities. It's like champions like Aatrox would use it well, or like Cassiopeia, but having enhanced healing on just the passive isn't really that meaningful. For the shards, your best bet's going to be attack speed, and then double resistances based on your matchup, pretty similar to support, as it's just really about dominating early. Having the double armor against melees is so oppressive, and then if you're playing into a mixed matchup, champions like Akali and whatnot, you could just go armor and magic resist, basically the same as support, but having attack speed instead of the adaptive force, because your auto attacks become more meaningful in a solo lane than they would as support. So that's that. Really the only variation that there would be with press the attack would be coup de grace, again, into squishier champions. The other options you could have in secondary runes I don't think are like meaningful enough, because what second wind offers alone is so high value for Volibear. So to trade that off for something like free boots or cosmic insight isn't so valuable. Even like time warp tonic and biscuits, like Volibear doesn't need the mana, and since he doesn't need it, he's better off having the resolve tree anyways. And then he also doesn't really need corrupting potion either, so time warp tonic loses a lot of value. He doesn't need the movement speed from time warp tonic. He doesn't need the immediate healing from time warp tonic in a lot of matchups, so I don't see that being that high value. Maybe into like an Irelia or something this could be okay if they're running it as well, but it'd be matchup specific. So I don't think this is super low value, but I don't think in most matchups it'd be required. And I think second wind would be beating Biscuits and time warp tonic alone in most matchups. For sorcery second, you can make an argument for like Nimbus Cloak and I suppose Absolute Focus, but it's a really aggressive and then also just not as good option, as you just lose a huge lightning tool in second wind every single time, and you really can't make up for it anywhere in the sorcery tree. Even if you had like Nimbus Cloak for like playmaking potential with your TP and flash, I don't see it being that useful. And then with the domination tree, I don't see anything really. I see like a cheap shot and like maybe a relentless hunter, but That's like if you're planning on losing lane or something. So that's my thoughts on Volibear top lane runes, with Press the Attack and Conquer being your most viable options. With like Aftershock or Grasp in the top lane, I really just don't see it. I don't see any utility, because if you're picking them in the top lane, it should be a counter pick into the enemy top lane, or whenever they pick any like bruiser or like, you know, mid-range champion. I think that what's offered in the precision tree is just so valuable for Volibear, and it's a lot of damage offered. And the extra durability that you get from the resolve tree basically relegates you to playing as a support as Volibear in the top lane, and that's just not ideal. There's champions that do that better, and yeah, it's just not ideal, as Volibear can deal a lot of damage and can snowball, and you're better having runes that help you do that versus having extra durability through Aftershock or Grasp into any matchup, as the extra durability doesn't equate to more damage for Volibear as it does other champions, unless you have your jungler there. So maybe if you're duoed with an Elise and you run Aftershock, it would help you get more dives off or something, but it's a very slim case, and the reward for doing so isn't even that high. So it's like you're really covering up mistakes of the player or the playing the champion in such a way, and then you would be accelerating like what the champion's good at and whatnot in the top lane. For Volibear as a carry in the bot lane, I think that the runes wouldn't really change that much. I think that Press the Attack would probably be your best bet, as a lot of what you're looking to do is farm the early game and then become a menace where you always have the threat of flipping the enemy. Since you're playing as like a still as engaged maybe, but like a more not engaging at every single instance of the game where it could happen. You would still function as a tank / engage for the team. I think that Press the Attack would be your best bet, because you're not battling melee champions in the bot lane, so Conqueror loses a lot of value there. The champions that you're going to be flipping, it's the same thing with if you would be running Press the Attack top lane against tanks. I think having the exposed damage from Press the Attack against tankier champions or even squishier champions is going to be more valuable, given the nature of how a carry Volibear in the bot lane with probably a fasting Senna would function. You'd still be flipping frontline into like 4 allies that are probably stronger than you. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Volibear runes. The most valuable ones being Conqueror, Press the Attack, Last Stand, Triumph, and then Hextech Flash if you're support, and then Second Wind if you're top lane. Brief recap: Press the Attack against squishy champions or tanks if you're looking to, like, hyper tanks like Maokai and Sion, if you're looking to provide more utility for your team in losing matchups like that. And then Conquer into bruiser champions, as the damage offered and the sustain in fights is just way more impactful than the burst that you can gain from Press the Attack or the utility you can gain from Press the Attack, given the matchups. And then for the secondary runes, the snowball potential with Demolish is probably better in solo queue in almost every single across like 100 games. It's probably more valuable, but Overgrowth should be the more consistent option at higher MMRs. And then Second Wind is your best bet in almost every single matchup because of the HP gained. And then Bone Plating's okay into melee matchups. So what's offered for runes for Volibear is extra damage in either Press the Attack or Conquer, both having their use cases. Extra health with Triumph and Second Wind. Extra damage with attack speed and Last Stand or Coup de Grace. Extra survivability with Tenacity, Triumph, Armor, Magic Resist, and yeah, that's really it. So that's my thoughts on Volibear runes. I think he's a really fantastic solo queue top laner. I think he's really cool as a carry bot laner, with like a fasting Senna, or like any sort of variant of like a fasting Senna that would arise in the bot lane. And I think that he's okay as like a counter pick to Yuumi in the bot lane, a really fun one at that. So yeah, really cool champion. It's lame that they're probably going to kill him this season like they did Aatrox, but yeah, play him while you can. I don't know. If this video helped you, leave a like on the video. It helps me. If you should subscribe, because you should anyways. Yeah, I mean, you can only subscribe once, so you might as well. And then twitch.tv/SorryNelson in the description. Don't even go to it. Just subscribe. It's completely fine. Alrighty, bye-bye. See you later. Volibear. I love Volibear, man. Like, Volibear support is some of the coolest shit. Yeah, bye-bye. See ya. Volibear. Bye bye. See you later, man. Click what?